We've all had that awkward moment when we are watching a movie or show with family or friends and things start getting spicy on screen. Whether it's a brief moment of nudity or an auteur's attempt at softcore porn, sex in film and TV has long been a source of controversy and debate. Is it just a showcase for us to ogle hot actors, or does that threesome have a deeper meaning? We all know that sex sells, so is Hollywood just giving us what we want, or is it as unnecessary and pandering as every Disney live-action remake? In this video, we dive a little into the history of on-screen nudity and sex scenes, the case for and against it, as well as dissecting directors' motivations behind them, along with some notable examples. After which, we'll answer the ultimate question and title of this video. Without further ado, this is Are Movie Sex Scenes Necessary? The beginnings of sex in cinema can be traced to Europe when in 1933, Czech filmmaker Gustav Machady released the romantic drama Ecstasy. The scene in question is very brief and by today's standards very tame, but at the time, to see what essentially was the first orgasm on screen caused a wave of intrigue and controversy, culminating in it infamously being the first film to be blocked by the US from entering the country. Because of the Hays Code, America wouldn't experience a cinematic sexual revolution of its own until the late 1960s and 1970s, with films like Midnight Cowboy and Last Tango in Paris. During this time, Europe was keeping its tradition of sexual expression with the Swedish drama film I Am Curious, which featured maybe the earliest depictions of male nudity on screen that was allowed to be played in theaters in the United States, but not before it was banned in Massachusetts, which led to a case that made it all the way to the Supreme Court before it was deemed as not obscene. The 1980s and 1990s brought us the rise of the erotic thriller genre, which was led by iconic films such as Basic Instinct and Body Double, while other films from the era made headlines for different reasons, such as Henry and June for being the first film to get an NC-17 rating, or American Gigolo, which was the first time a male American movie star went full frontal nude. Over the next few decades, it was sex on TV that would capture the headlines. Shows like Sex and the City, Game of Thrones, and Shameless were just a few of many that would have us changing the channel whenever someone would walk in the room. Believe it or not, movies today have actually vastly reduced the amount of sex on screen. In a study by The Economist, it was found that compared to the early 2000s, there is 40% less sex and nudity in major films. What's interesting is that other vices, such as violence and swearing, haven't experienced the same reduction. Now, let's look at the case for and against sex scenes in movies. The case for sex scenes in movies, I believe, centers around a few arguments. The most straightforward of those being that it is integral to the plot and leads to character development. Movies like Oldboy, Gone Girl, or The Handmaiden have sex scenes that advance the story and give us more insight into the characters that we're following. Some films, like Poor Things, would be entirely different and arguably worse without the use of explicit but humorous sex scenes. Speaking of Poor Things, its director Yorgos Lanthimos, when asked in an interview about the use of sex in his film, made a point by asking, why is there no sex in movies? Further elaborating that sex is just human nature and expression, and to completely censor that would be prudish and unfaithful to the source material. This leads to the other argument around the use of sex scenes, which is that it helps to normalize it. A film like Brokeback Mountain is the perfect example as to why sex scenes hold a place in cinema. At the time of its release, it was extremely rare to see same-sex intimacy on screen that wasn't played for laughs. So when it was released and featured a sex scene between two major Hollywood actors, it was met with major controversy. In retrospect, a film like that taking the step forward to portray something in the way it did led to other filmmakers taking positive risks, and for audience members to not view something so normal as taboo. If done correctly, movies can even portray sex in a non-exploitative or unrealistic way, leading to healthier views on sex. Especially when compared to porn, which you could argue has wreaked major havoc on the brains of its consumers and their views on what sex and romance is supposed to be like. Not to say that people should learn about sex and romance from movies, but if it's something you're going to consume anyway, wouldn't you rather most impressionable viewers see something along the lines of Love and Basketball compared to any generic porn film? The last argument for the use of sex scenes in movies is on the basis of hypocrisy. What I mean by that is that Hollywood and much of society in general has seemingly decided that nudity and sex in film is a step too far most times, but seeing our protagonist gun down hundreds of people is considered acceptable without a second thought. As a huge fan of films like John Wick, I'm not arguing against the use of extreme violence in film, but rather pointing out how it's ridiculous that it's somehow considered more appropriate than seeing a nipple. But now that I've made my case for sex scenes in movies, now I'll argue the case against it. The case against movie sex scenes has its own arguments. One of those arguments is that for every film where sex is important to the plot, there are dozens more where sex serves no purpose and at times detracts from the movie. Did the Eternals need a sex scene? Did we need to see a 90-year-old Clint Eastwood have a threesome in The Mule? Don't get me started on The Room. Okay, maybe not The Room. All this to say, sex in cinema is often used as a cheap and uncreative device to advance a relationship or prove a point about a character. Some notable filmmakers have also voiced their opinions as to why they avoid sex scenes in their movies, such as Quentin Tarantino, who when asked stated that these scenes are problematic and that if a sex scene had ever come up that was essential to the story, I would have done it, but so far it hasn't been necessary. Another famous director, Werner Herzog, expressed his distaste for sex scenes in movies, which he labeled as indiscreet, and goes on to say that if you really want to see a sex scene, just watch porno films. Another issue that directors like these and others in the industry bring up as a case against sex in film is that many times it can be viewed as exploitative towards those acting in it. Actors like Sydney Sweeney, on the topic of participating in some scenes like this, stated, "I've had experiences where I want to go home and scrub myself completely raw because I feel disgusting." Or Emilia Clarke of Game of Thrones fame, who said that she accepted the role before she knew it would even require nudity, and even admitted to crying before filming some of the earlier sex scenes on the show. While the presence of intimacy coordinators makes sure things are done in a way that everyone present is comfortable with, it's something that for one reason or another, some actors end up regretting. The last argument against it is simply that audiences these days don't want it. As mentioned earlier in the video, there is a drastic decrease in sex scenes in film today than there was 20 years ago. According to The Hollywood Reporter, in a study conducted by UCLA, it was found that a majority of Gen Z viewers wanted more friendships and platonic relationships portrayed on screen, as opposed to strictly romantic or sexual ones. Nearly 50% of those surveyed said that sex isn't needed in the majority of movies and TV shows, and that it is overused. Reasons why this new generation of viewers may be put off by scenes like this could include a shift in cultural norms, as Gen Z is dating less and having less casual sex than previous generations. And now that we have made a case for and against sex scenes in movies, here are my closing thoughts. I believe a compelling argument can and has been made for both sides, and to avoid copping out, I'd echo Tarantino's sentiments that I am very much okay with the use of sex scenes in movies, with the caveat that they should be essential to the story being told. This way, the audience doesn't feel like they are being forced to sit through something that many times is unnecessarily uncomfortable and pointless. If there is meaning to the sex and nudity presented, I believe this would also make actors feel less exploited as opposed to just having them stripped to catch headlines. At the end of the day, making movies and TV gives us the freedom to express art however we want, and if a director feels it is better to show rather than imply, then that is their freedom, but they shouldn't be surprised when people don't want to watch. Let me know in the comments where you stand on this topic, and if you like content like this, make sure to check out my previous videos on equally interesting topics around film and TV, and feel free to like and subscribe for future content. Have a great day.